Today we are going to learn how to multiply binomials, and this isn't something that we have seen before. What we are familiar with is how to multiply monomials, and so there is a technique on how to do this. And the acronym that I want you to remember when we are multiplying two binomials is FOIL. So I want to walk you through that first and tell you what it stands for. The first thing you're going to do when multiplying two binomials is you are going to multiply the first two numbers. So that's what the F stands for. F is for first. So our first number in the first bracket and the first number in the second bracket. You multiply those together. Next, we are going to go to our outer numbers. So when I think of outer numbers, I want you to think of the numbers that are as far away as possible from the center. So this number times this number is what you're going to do next, and that's what the O stands for, outer. Next, we're going to multiply our inner numbers, and you can think of the inner numbers as being the two numbers that are as close to the center as possible. So our inner numbers would be this times this. And then finally, we're going to move on to the last two numbers. So the last two numbers would be this one, the last number in this bracket, and the last number in this bracket. And you're going to multiply those together. So the acronym that you are trying to remember is FOIL, which stands for first, outer, inner, and last. Okay, so I'm going to show you an example of how it's done. This is exactly the same example as the first slide, and we're going to work through this example together. So if you recall, the F in FOIL stands for first. We're going to be multiplying these two numbers together. X times X. Think back to power laws when the bases are the same and you're multiplying, you're just adding the exponents together. So we're going to get x squared. The O in FOIL stands for outer. And I'm just going to show all the arrows up here. So you're multiplying the two numbers that are on the outside, as far away from the center as possible. So you're going to be multiplying the x times the 2. That's going to give me a positive 2x. We're moving on to I, which represents inner. So keep in mind, those are the two numbers that are as close to the center as possible, which would be 1 times x, and that gives us 1x. And then finally we have L, which is last, and that represents the last two numbers, so the 1 and the 2. 1 times 2 is going to give us positive 2. And now for our next step, we're just going to gather like terms and add whatever we can. So nothing looks like an x squared. That's going to remain there. 2x plus 1x is 3x. And then the positive 2 stays there at the end. Our final answer ends up being this trinomial. Okay, so we're moving on to slightly more complicated examples. In this example, you're going to notice that there is a binomial here, another binomial here, but the difference is I now have a constant, and it doesn't have to be a constant, any monomial in the front. So how are we going to tackle a question like this? Well, there are two different ways to do it, but I'm going to show you the way that I think is the most effective. And what we're going to do is we're going to ignore this 3 and just FOIL the brackets as we did in the previous example. So when I say ignore the 3, obviously you can't just get rid of it. So I'm going to just write it in the front, and I'm just going to ignore it for now. I'm going to deal with it later. And I'm going to start with a bracket. Okay, let's go through the same steps again. So F is first, multiply the first two terms. 2x times x is 2x squared. O stands for outer, so you're multiplying the two outer numbers. 2x times positive 4 is positive 8x. Moving on to I, which is inner, multiplying negative 1 times x, which is negative x. And L is for last. So we're going to multiply -1 times +4, which is -4. And we close the bracket. So again, to repeat myself, we're going to FOIL the two binomials like we did in the previous slide. And we're just going to leave the 3 for the end. Now what I want to do is I want to simplify what's in the bracket before I move on. So again, we're ignoring the 3. We're just going to leave it right there. You have 2x squared plus 8x minus 4. If I'm collecting like terms and adding them up, the 2x squared stays there. Positive 8x minus x will be positive 7x minus 4. And now this question is just a distributive property question. I'll just write distributive property. And so we're going to take that 3 and we're going to distribute it into the bracket. So 3 times 2x squared is 6x squared. 3 times positive 7x is positive 21x. And 3 times -4 is -12. And that is our final answer. Okay, our last example for this lesson, let's break it down. So we have 2 binomials over here that we're going to multiply, and we are going to be using FOIL to do so. And then we just have another binomial here, but we're just subtracting it. So I'll show you how that looks. The first thing we want to do is to go ahead and FOIL our 2 binomials. So hopefully by now you guys are getting the hang of it. I'll do it a little bit more quickly. First is 3y times y is 3y squared. Outer would be 3y times -1, which would be -3y. Inner would be 2 times y, which would be positive 2y. And then last would be, and I know the color is all the same, so hopefully you're following along, positive 2 times -1 is -2. Now, we've dealt with the 2 binomials, we're done that part, but we still have this section right here to do. So this is actually just a regular old distributive question. There is a 1 over here, so we're going to take that -1 and we're going to distribute it into the bracket. -1 times y is -y, and -1 times positive 3 is -3. Now that we've gotten rid of all the brackets, and remember our goal whenever we have brackets is to open them up so we can move around and manipulate the numbers inside. All of the brackets are gone, so this is a regular gathering like terms and simplifying question. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. 3y squared, and then I have a whole bunch of y's. Let's put those together. -3y plus 2y minus y minus 2 minus 3. And for the grand finale, we have 3y squared. You can add all of these up. So -3 plus 2 is -y, and -y minus y is -2y. If I did that quickly, just pause the video and try it yourself and see if it makes sense to you. And then -2 minus 3 is -5. And that's our final answer.